So, good afternoon, everybody. I am Corinne Trommsdorff. I'm the Executive Director of the French Solid Waste Partnership. This session will be in English. So, for those who do not have yet a headset, there are headsets at the door, which you can take to have a translation in French. However, I do encourage you to try to listen to this session in English. I've briefed our speakers so that they should try to speak not too fast and make it easy to understand for everybody. It's a great opportunity to actually get that experience of listening to a session in English. And we will also be taking some questions throughout the session. Feel free to ask your questions in French if you're more comfortable that way, but either way will work. We decided to include this session in the congrès to provide the Astee members with an opportunity to get a glimpse of what is happening at international levels. Astee is the national member of two international associations, the International Water Association and the International Solid Waste Association. So we have speakers from both of those associations to bring us around the world and share some global trends on waste management and our relationship to resources and on water as well. This whole relationship to resources really echoes what we've heard in this plenary session that we're just coming out of, the paradox of putting together what we think is the right thing to do and actually what we just feel like is a social indicator of our success, and therefore how much we consume goods, how much we need our comfort. So balancing these needs for our social qualifiers and our connection to nature and wanting to do the right thing to preserve nature are things that we have a hard time to reconcile. And so in the global trends that we'll hear about today at international level, we see this paradox coming out a lot. The reduce part is very hard to implement. We will have a first part on those global trends, and I will take a few questions after those two talks. And then we'll have two deep dives on two specific topics. One on plastics recycling, and one on the reuse of treated water, of wastewater in English, which is a very different way of saying it in English and in French. In French, we say eau usée, and in English, we say wastewater, but it's actually used water in French. Anyway, I will stop here, and I would like to ask Aditi to come and share some global trends on solid waste management. So you can switch over here.
I always have to do this because of my height. Can you see me? Yeah. Okay, good. So I was the one that Corinne had to remind about talking slowly. So you have to tell me if I'm going too fast. So good afternoon to everybody. I'm so happy to be here. My first time in Quimper. I think that's the right pronunciation. It's a pleasure for me to be speaking with you today. And I would like to thank the French Solid Waste Partnership and Astee for hosting this event. So very quickly, before we move on to the deep dive of the international trends in waste management, I'd like to tell you a little bit about where I work, the International Solid Waste Association. It's, we call it the world's leading organization that brings together professionals working in solid waste and resource management. And we are a member-based organization with a secretariat that is in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. We've been there for about 4 years now, and before that we were based in Vienna for a decade. So if you've known us, you've probably also known us when we were in Vienna. We have a scientific and technical committee, I think that might be interesting for you, which is divided into 10 different working groups. And these working groups are working on topics anywhere from collection and transportation of waste to the biological treatment of waste to hazardous waste management, which is a very niche topic, to anything like recycling and waste minimization, and then overarching issues about climate change and how waste and resource management are linked to that. So you can find out a lot more about us on our website. It's just very simple, www.iswa.org. And if you're interested about anything that we do, you may just reach out to me afterwards as well. So moving on, where do we find ourselves as humans on this beautiful planet of ours? We are seeing that all the activities that we do, our industrial activities, our social activities, are leading to major changes to the planet's ecosystem. And UNEP is rightly calling it the triple planetary crisis. Essentially, this is just a term for 3 intersecting global environmental challenges that we are facing of pollution, of climate change, and biodiversity loss. And essentially, it's leading to a humanitarian crisis because nature doesn't know the boundaries that we create, nation states and regions and so on. These are crises that transcend boundaries, and essentially SDG 17, which calls for partnerships and collaboration across nations and organizations, is going to be crucial for us to deal with any of these challenges. So we can't deal with it alone. Cooperation is crucial for tackling these. And recognizing these challenges, the United Nations Environment Programme's members recognize this, and they basically came together to commit to a new legally binding treaty. We don't know what form it's going to take, what kind of a multilateral environmental agreement it's going to be, but the nation states have come together to be negotiating this treaty, and the aim is to finish the negotiations by the end of this year. And they formed a committee called the International Negotiating Committee dealing with this plastics issue. And as we speak, all these kind of intersessional sessions are going on, and people are discussing what needs to be in that treaty. And so this is the resolution that was adopted during the United Nations Environment Assembly in 2022. This is more to do with plastics. On the other hand, the International Solid Waste Association, where I work, we're working together with UNEP to come up with our 2nd edition of the Global Waste Management Outlook. And we released this during UNEA 6, which is the United Nations Environmental Assembly 6, which happened back in March this year, end of February, March this year. And a lot of stark, unique, and also not so unique findings came out, essentially, from all the research that we did. One thing we know to be true, because of a lot of studies that have happened over decades of waste management being studied, is that economic growth and waste generation remain closely linked and will remain so till the economy decouples. And what we saw is that higher income countries and higher income settings, we like to call it, generate more waste per person and have a much more resource use footprint. And why I've said settings in brackets over there is because we now see inequalities not just between the global south and the global north, or the developed and developing, if you like to still call it that. We see that there is inequality even within a country. So in India, for instance, where I live, if it's a higher income colony or high income household, it's going to be generating a lot more waste than, say, a low income household. So even within countries, we're seeing this kind of inequality exist. And so the Global Waste Management Outlook 2024, with all the data that we had, I do have to side note that data is very hard to come by in our field, especially, a systematic collection of data still doesn't exist in many parts of the world, and that's one of the things we have recommended that we start doing, because you can't make good policy without knowing exactly what challenges we are facing. So this is one of the findings that we had, and then we also see that there is going to be a projected increase in dumping and open burning till 2050 if we just go on this business as usual path. And so fast-growing economies in Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, some parts of Latin America, they still rely very heavily on open burning and open dumping. And this is essentially because systems don't exist for treating or collecting their waste. And so people then take it up to, take it in their hands to manage that waste. And what happens, what's the easiest way for them to manage it is to reduce volumes by burning. And so this is absolutely a stark scenario, and it has so many repercussions, not only for the environment but also for human health. And so that connection is something we're working on also within ISWA. We work, we have dialogues with other UN agencies about it. And so if we are on the business as usual path, we are seeing that by 2050, the amount of waste that we generated, say in 2020, we took 2020 as a baseline year because we started working on this publication just before the pandemic. We produced about 2.1 billion tons of municipal solid waste. And if we carry on this path, with a lot of economies now developing and growing on the GDP ladder, we're going to get to 3.7 billion tons. Which is kind of unmanageable because already about 40% of the waste is not being managed properly. And so just want to show you the big differences in the regions that exist. This is the municipal solid waste collection rates by region. And I think I'll just give a side note here. The system boundary that we drew for the publication was municipal solid waste. That's because ISWA deals a lot with municipalities, and that's the kind of waste we focus on. So it's not looking at industrial waste or mining and so on and so forth. So this is what we actually see on the streets. And when you see these pictures of turtles caught in little plastic bags and so on, it's essentially coming from leakages from municipal solid waste systems. And so if you look at this chart, you see that Europe, Western Europe, and North America has reached almost 100% of collection, averaging close to 100% waste collection. But if you look at Sub-Saharan Africa or even look at Central and Southeast Asia, you're seeing only 36, 37%. So bringing the world average to about 75% of collection. And this chart is going to show you the destinations of the municipal solid waste in 2020. So yeah, what I want to point out here is about almost 40% is uncontrolled. That means it just leaks into the environment without absolutely no control, open burning and open dumping, as I said, and about 60-something% is being controlled. And within that controlled graph as well, you will see you have a large portion going to landfills. And here I want to make a distinction because I do this a lot in when I work in the projects in Southeast Asia and so on. A lot of people mix the two terms. They call dump sites and landfills as the same thing. And we try to make sure that they understand the difference between the two. And I'm sure in the room you know that landfills have better environmental controls, no leakage into the environment. You have liner systems, you have leachate collection, you have covers, you have gas collection systems and so on. And dump sites are literally without any of those controls. But even so, if you look at the two graphs, you see that almost 70% of our waste that is being generated is being managed either by landfills or in dump sites. So basically giving us a big aspiration to move up the waste hierarchy, because if you remember the waste hierarchy, right at the bottom is, in fact, not even part of the waste hierarchy is the uncontrolled and open burning and dumping, and the small triangle at the bottom is the landfill option, which Europe has completely gone above, and you're moving more towards prevention being the first thing, reducing, preventing, and so on. So this graph tells us basically that there's a lot to do. And projected municipal solid waste destinations compared to 2020, if we are in the business as usual case, again, that whole chart will just uniformly increase. The bar graphs will just uniformly increase. So what we did in the GWMO 2024 was that we basically played around with a few scenarios, and we brought them down to 3, where we looked at waste management as usual, where basically the current practices would continue, and the regions which are not being served currently, almost 40% of the waste being uncontrolled dumps and so on, we saw that it's only going to increase. So that was our business as usual scenario. We didn't make any changes to what the status quo is. Then we looked at the second scenario where we looked at waste under control, and here we said basically, we would start investing in prevention and investing in infrastructure. And then the third scenario, which is the most desirable here, is basically the circular economy scenario. And here we're going to be, of course, investing heavily in infrastructure and then moving up recycling to almost 60% average, globally averaged. And so here it is again, a little more detail. Here waste generation continues to increase and there is no decoupling between economic growth and waste generation. And here the investments also remain kind of constant, so you don't see many changes. You only see a big increase, as I showed you earlier on, in dumping and open burning. And here in waste under control, we start to see a little bit more changes. We put into place policies like EPR. We see that we start to try and decouple waste generation and economic growth, and we have investments in collection, recycling, and so on, and these kind of technologies. And finally, the third option which we looked at was the circular economy scenario, is where we have a sustainable circular economy where materials stay in the system for as long as possible. As much as they can, of course, removing any hazardous loops. So there, a case made for a circular economy, of course, also understands that there are certain substances that you don't want circulating and sending to final sinks, whether it's incineration or landfills and so on. So after we did this analysis, our economists also analyzed what the externalities of all the hidden costs of mismanagement of waste, which we don't really always talk about, and how it affects us. And what we basically see is with the 2020 baseline, it's costing our economy about $360 billion a year. And when you start moving to the three scenarios, business as usual, it's only going to increase almost double to $640 billion a year. And if you start moving towards waste under control and circular economy scenarios, you're going to essentially see a net benefit at the end, like almost $100 billion. And so this was the first of its kind analysis, and we presented that during UNEA. And it basically tells us there are three waste management priorities to prevent kind of runaway impacts. We need investments in solid waste management systems, collection, transportation, any kind of technologies, and so on. And this needs to be prioritized in order to not have any harmful effects of poor waste management, such as dumping and burning, because I think waste management 100 and something years ago in the West started with a very firm purpose of making sure that humans were not affected, because you started seeing plagues and rodents and diseases spreading. So human health was the importance, and then the drivers continued to change over the century, and it became environmental and resource driven. Recycling is resource driven, and so on. And now we see these three challenges that I spoke about: the triple planetary crisis and the resource challenges, and we want to move towards a circular economy. So we need to make sure that we start also looking at upstream, because waste management was essentially and typically end of pipe thing, where we as waste managers receive what the municipalities give us to manage. But we need to start speaking to producers, to designers, to industries who are putting products into the market, have these EPR schemes, talk about design for recycling, design for reuse, and so on. Just a little bit of a deep dive into plastics, because you're going to also hear plastics examples from Dirk, is that, okay, so these two numbers are from 2 different years, but you get the idea, because the latest numbers do not exist yet. But in 2023, the world generated about 2.3 billion tons of municipal solid waste. I'll have to start speaking faster. Okay, I'll try to finish in the next 3-4 minutes, yeah. And the plastic waste that we generated in 2019 was 353 million metric tons. What I'm trying to say here is that almost all the plastics that we produced kind of becomes waste. A lot of it is, I won't call it only single use, but a short use. Single use might not be the right term for it, but short use. Only very little stays in our environment for much longer, and that would be within our construction, transportation, aviation, and so on and so forth. But a lot of this waste has not been ever managed since the beginning of the plastics revolution. I mean, plastic is a term essentially for a number of materials. So it's like a blanket term. There are many, many kinds of plastics, and you already know that it's from the crude oil industry. The product is basically, there's a whole process that's followed. You extract the crude oil, and then there's a whole process of making it into, whatever products you need, extrusion and so on and so forth. And at some point you start adding different chemicals to it to make it even, to make the property even more desirable for the application that you have. And so you just note that I want to say that additives and stabilizers are added to this whole thing, because that's what makes it sometimes more, harmful for human health. But not to say only bad things, because plastics actually has revolutionized our society. And if you, just a small example, like if you look at a drip system in a hospital, the only actually, actual material that can keep giving the drip on a steady basis is a plastic that, kind of becomes a vacuum afterwards. And so plastic has definitely revolutionized our society, made it more efficient and so on, but there is a dark side to it as well. So how much of it is being actually produced? So about approximately 6% of the crude oil that we produce at the moment is sent for plastics production, and this is only going to grow as I said, as many economies still are growing, and our plastics intake is going up, at least in the global south. And the two numbers that I had told you about, 367 million metric tons were produced, approximately the same amount in 2019, and 353 million tons went into the municipal solid waste. So a lot of it is going in, and we cannot simply recycle our way out of it. So I don't keep recommending recycling as an option to every country that we work in, because I think the number goes that we've only recycled about 9% of plastics. 9% of our, she said 5, and then she made it 1. So now only 9% of our plastics have been recycled since the beginning of plastic production. Anyhow, let me skip all these. I already talked about the environmental impacts of mismanagement, and of course the human health impacts through chemical exposure, through microplastics. It's a big discussion. I mean, I'm going to just show you a snippet of a paper that was recently out. I'm not saying this is the only paper. This is one of the papers and research that's going on microplastics, and the fact that we are all ingesting it through our food systems, through air, through water, and so on. And that's where the link between the waste and the waste sector and the solid waste sector and the water sector comes, because we can actually work together on this particular topic too. The next slide I'm going to skip as well, because there are also a lot of research and discussions going on about alternatives. And I think Dirk might say that we don't really have a viable alternative yet, because it sounds good on paper, but when you look at the life cycle and you actually look at the whole from beginning from cradle to grave, you might see that the benefit is not there. However, I want to say, of course, what we can focus on, we can focus on improving our resource and waste management systems on the ground, leakages, fairly simple things. These are not rocket science things. We can just establish good, robust, financially sustainable systems, and that's what we do at ISWA. We work with communities and municipalities to do that. We need policy intervention, because I think the speaker in the plenary was also saying that, we keep talking about behavior change, but it has to, the trigger has to come from inside. It's not easy to keep telling people and again. International collaboration, and that's why I'm standing here today. I'm hoping that many of you who are working in this space in waste management will join us and come with us, give your experience. I mean, tell us your good stories, your bad stories. We look forward to all of those and your experiences. And of course, public awareness, which goes without saying. It's last but not the least. If people are not aware, they won't act. And then the last slide is to make a call for a circular economy. It makes sense in every way, financially, also for the health of the environment and everything. It's going to just be the most relevant for us. And if you want to read the report in detail, you can download it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aditi. Can you keep up the QR code a bit longer?
Oops, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. just if people want to flash it, that way they can access the report. It has a lot of really nice content that's worth looking at in more details. And Aditi gave us just a glimpse of it. I forgot to say earlier before you started talking, Aditi is the technical director for ISWA, and she's a great resource. I encourage you to get to know her and come to talk to her throughout the day tomorrow as well, and the evening tonight. We've just heard from Aditi that mismanaged waste is a huge challenge globally. We still have 40% of domestic waste that is mismanaged. It's expected to double by 2050. This international challenge is mostly the reason why the French Solid Waste Partnership was created a year ago, which I now have the leadership on. Because we want to work on the enabling environment that will help the transition towards circular economy. We saw in what she presented that it's that scenario that we want to embrace so that the co-benefits will outweigh the negative externalities of our activities in regards to waste management. And that transition requires international frameworks. Now, we're going to switch to the water world. And water also has huge challenges. We also have 80% of wastewater that is mismanaged and challenges associated to climate change. I'd like to invite Kala Veeravamurthy, the executive director of the International Water Association, to share with us these big challenges around water.
Thank you very much, Corinne. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And again, it's really a great pleasure to be here. Because a short of time, I'll go straight into the presentation. Just to introduce you to IWA. So most of you probably know IWA. We're a membership association of about 10,000 members from 140 countries. So we're truly an international organization. We have individual members, we have corporate members. Astee is our governing member, so we have 60 governing members from around the world. We are organized into 50 plus specialist groups where we really do deep dive research into various topics on water. And our specialist groups really combine researchers with practitioners, and so they're working collectively together.
We have to push it to full screen.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, it's on full screen.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, sorry. No problem at all. So we have these 50 specialist groups. I'll carry on. And do you want to...
That's weird.
Just click on that. Okay. So we have 50 specialist groups that really do deep dive research, and they do combine researchers with practitioners, and so we pride ourselves really on taking research into practice. We also have cross-cutting programs where we combine lots of different specialist groups. So we have a very successful program on climate smart utilities where we try and help utilities address the challenges that they face both in terms of mitigation and adaptation. We have a very successful digital water program, and these programs enable our members to be involved in some very impactful activities, both our members but also our young water professionals. Most of the knowledge that we generate is articulated through our conferences and our journals. IWA has a conference every week of the year somewhere in the world. We have our very large conferences which attract around 10,000 people every 2 years, our development congress that attracts around 5,000 people every odd year. And then we have lots of other conferences going on. I was in Istanbul last week for our anaerobic digestion conference where we had around 750 people. We also publish a lot of our material. We publish around 20 academic journals. We publish around 30 books every year. The #1 water journal in the world, Water Research, is an IWA journal. So that just gives you a little bit of background to IWA. Now, what I wanted to now talk about is really where we see things moving from an IWA perspective. And I think the most interesting area for us and where we see most innovation is in the space of wastewater and sanitation. As Corinne pointed out, 80% of wastewater globally is not treated. And that, of course, creates lots of public health issues, environmental issues, and it damages our water sources. But what we're seeing is that attitudes are now changing, and there's really a huge interest in wastewater treatment. And many countries, particularly in the global south, but also in regions like Eastern Europe, Latin America, and of course Asia and Africa, they're at the cusp of investing huge amounts of money in the area of wastewater. Now, most of these countries, they have a growing interest in it because they're viewing wastewater very much as a potential water source, something that can provide them with greater water security. And so they're seeing wastewater management, you might say, as an adaptation strategy. Now, all these countries have the advantage of really being able to build on the experiences of the global north. In the global north, the last 70 years was like one big pilot study. We started with very clunky systems, and over time, incrementally, we've started to improve those systems. And now you're seeing, more elegant and efficient systems evolving in this space. And so these countries are really embarking on their journey of wastewater at a time when technologies are converging. And so it's really the best time for them to sort of embark on this journey because they can learn from those lessons. And at IWA, we believe that the next 20 years will really be the golden age for wastewater and sanitation. And a lot of our specialist groups are putting quite a lot of effort into this space. Now, when we look at some of the innovations that are taking place in wastewater, most of it is around intensification. And this is being seen from both a mitigation perspective, but also from an adaptation perspective. And intensification is where you're really trying to get the same treated water quality outcomes by using less resources, like using less energy, for example. And you're trying to do things with a much lower physical footprint. And there are lots of intensification processes that we're seeing emerging, and some of them are quite well developed. Carbon redirection, for example, is where we're using technologies to remove more of the organic matter from our primary settling tanks. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to have a much lower organic load in our reactors, which mean that we use less energy, but it also allows us to improve our feed into the anaerobic digesters. And so what we're able to do is to sort of operate our systems with lower energy but get the same sort of outcomes. And so we're doing more with less. When we look at things like granular sludge, this changes the physics of our process. It improves the settlability. And so AGS particles are denser, they're more compact, and so this leads to better solid and liquid separation. And this allows for smaller clarifiers or more throughput through our existing clarifiers, and it allows us to optimize the space of our treatment plant. So again, we're doing more with less. And when we look at things like membrane bioreactors, here we're integrating biological processes with advanced membrane filtration processes, and it really allows us to separate the solids from the treated wastewater, and it eliminates the need for secondary clarifiers. And there's a lot of research going on in anaerobic MBRs, which have much lower aeration needs, and they can generate biogas without digesters, and that biogas can be captured. So a lot of these innovations are allowing us to implement more efficient systems that use less energy and have smaller footprints, and so lower capex and opex costs. Now, I know that there's a lot of people from the waste community here, so I'd also like to talk about some of the innovations in the space of anaerobic digestion. As I said, I just came back from Istanbul, where we had our anaerobic digestion specialist group conference, and there was a lot of new innovations coming out there, but some of these are classical. So thermal hydrolysis, again, is a process where we're changing the physics. We're pressure cooking our sludge, which reduces its viscosity, and this means that we can increase our sludge loading rates into our anaerobic digesters. So again, more throughput through the digesters and enhanced energy production. We're also seeing a lot of interest in co-digesting our waste, so mixing food waste with solid waste with the wastewater sludge, and this can increase the biogas yield by about 3 times. And this idea of reducing the viscosity through things like thermohydrolysis allows us to improve that mixing opportunity. When we think of biogas, the biogas we produce, the most common form of utilization is through electricity and heat production, combined heat and power, which we call cogeneration. But now we're also seeing trigeneration, where the heat from the CHP engine is being used to drive absorption chillers to give us a source of cooling. So we've got cooling, heat, and power, so combined cooling, heat, and power plants. And then, of course, there's a lot of innovation around digitization. And with respect to wastewater, it really allows us to optimize and more precisely control our processes to avoid upsets, to optimize the performance, really sort of precision stoichiometric control. But digital sort of is covering the entire space within water. With respect to water itself, when we think about adaptation, there's a change in the perspective. And we're moving away. We're starting to focus much more on what we call the productive use of water. And this is where we're starting to ask ourselves, what is it that we want the water to do for us, and how can we match the quantity and the quality of water for that intended use? And what this results in is a move away, it results in us sort of trying to match the quantity and the quality of water for that intended use. So it moves us away from this idea that we should only use drinking water for everything. It also means that we use water multiple times. And this supports the circular approaches that you see happening within the water sector. And of course, we're also extracting value from the waste streams. A good example of the productive use of water is the West Basin Initiative in Los Angeles. Many might know this. And this is where they create what we call designer waters, or waters of different flavors. And so they take the treated wastewater from the city of Los Angeles, and then they produce these different grades of water using different plug-and-play technologies. So they use different treatment palettes to create these different grades of water. So one grade for irrigation, for example, one grade for industrial cooling, another sort of set of technologies to provide water for refinery industries, and then another set of treatment technologies for artificial aquifer recharge, mainly as a saline intrusion barrier. And so what they're doing here is using different plug-and-play technologies, creating different grades of water for different uses, and they're also able to vary the flows through these different treatment trains depending on the needs. Of course, nature-based solutions also give us lots of opportunities, and they can be used in many areas of water management, including sustainable urban drainage, natural flood alleviation. In this graphic, you can see their application for closing the loop. So from source water protection to water and wastewater treatment, and then sort of polishing the treated wastewater through things like soil aquifer treatment, so that water can be reused. So it's not just about grey infrastructure, it's also about green infrastructure. Now, the public love these types of systems. They much prefer green vegetation and water bodies around them rather than concrete. However, engineers are still a little bit uncomfortable with these systems. They feel that they're a little bit unpredictable. They experience seasonal variability. And generally, there isn't much clear guidance on how to design these systems. And very often, we're designing them based on what's worked in the past or rules of thumb. So in IWA, we are trying to improve the science that underpins nature-based solutions so that we can verify some of the claims that are being made around them. And we're really looking particularly around their effectiveness, their efficiency, and more importantly, their long-term environmental and financial sustainability, because all of this will really be critical for their long-term success and scalability. I want to stress that nature-based solutions will feature heavily in the future, there's no question. It's just that the science is still a little bit in its infancy, because they do have this sort of natural adaptation and resiliency features that we don't have with our grey infrastructure. When we talk about waste as a resource, there's a lot of interest in resource recovery. In IWA, we are doing some very in-depth research through our resource recovery cluster. And again, this is quite interesting for the emerging economies because they're building their systems now. They're starting to invest in wastewater treatment, and they're baking in some of these sort of circular approaches from the get-go. And more importantly, many of them see potential opportunities to generate money from their waste streams in order to make their wastewater systems financially sustainable, something they've struggled with in the past. Now, there are many technologies in this space. You know, you can recover phosphorus from your fertilizers, biopolymers for plastics, sulfur for lithium batteries. But many of these technologies are very much in their early stages of development, and currently they don't really give you a good financial return. And this is important because currently most of the research is focusing very much on the technology, and they're not really looking at the business models that make them attractive. There's very little research on trying to understand the market and the profitability for the products that we're recovering. And so we're really quite a long way away from making money from this. To give you an example, you know, a lot of people talk about phosphorus recovery and the ability to generate fertilizers and that you can make money from it. But actually the business models are more sophisticated than making money from the phosphorus with fertilizers. So you'll have a house who's paying a wastewater treatment provider to treat their waste. And that wastewater treatment provider might manage themselves or bring in a contractor to strip the phosphorus from their waste streams. But the main reason they're doing this is because it reduces their operational maintenance costs. You know, phosphorus precipitates in your return to activated sludge lines and it causes a lot of problems. So the primary reason for doing it is to reduce your O&M costs. And that's where the money is being made or the money is being saved. Now, a little bit like a side hustle, you can generate from the struvite high quality fertilizers, you can sell it and you can make some money. But that wouldn't be the primary reason why you would do it. The primary reason is really from the O&M savings, and this is where the profits are. So these business models are a lot more sophisticated than we sort of really give ourselves, that we're actually considering, and we need to do more in understanding these business models. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is the area of decentralization. And I don't mean decentralization from a governance perspective. It's much more in terms of the delivery of the service itself, more distributed systems. And we're seeing a lot of innovation in this space. And again, these decentralized systems have a sort of built-in adaptive capacity. At IWA, we're establishing a task force that's really trying to synthesize the work that's being done across the association in this space. You see, the water sector is looking at decentralization as a tactical opportunity. It's an ability for them to be more nimble, frugal, and more speedy at the way they deliver services. And as I said, there is a lot of imaginative and interesting research going on. You see, traditional centralized systems are very heavy. They require a lot of effort to get them moving. There's a lot of planning, a lot of land approvals, a lot of money, and a lot of time to implement. And this leads to long-term procrastination. I travel to many countries where 10 years ago I speak to decision makers and they say, we're planning to build a sewer and a centralized wastewater treatment plant. I go there 5 years later and they're still thinking about doing it, and I go there now and they're still thinking about doing it. So they procrastinate. Decentralization avoids some of these challenges. If you take traditionally what you see in a lot of these emerging economies, you'll have a centralized core where you have a sort of centralized system servicing the central core of the city. But on the outskirts of the city, you have large sections of society who remain unserved. And what we've tried to do traditionally is to extend the centralized system to those communities. And you end up with a very spaghetti sort of chaotic system. And so even though the physical infrastructure is there, it's not delivering the services to those people. And the system sort of tends to be quite defunct. When you look at a centralized, if you look at the sort of more distributed approach, so if you imagine that you ring fence your centralized core, and so what you're looking at doing is maintaining that centralized core, but building a sort of a decentralized opportunity around it, so a hybrid type of solution, this is where we're seeing a lot of thinking now. So, you know, if you think about it, these decentralized modules can grow in stages, right? So as you see the urban population growing, you can add modules over time. So you're not trying to anticipate what the population growth might be, you're actually sort of mapping it. And of course, you can stage your investments. And this is a very good adaptive feature. The other thing about decentralization is it allows you to be technologically agnostic. The technology used in one module doesn't have to be the same technology used in a different module. And this might be because over time you've evolved different types of solutions, or it may be that for a high-income community you have one type of solution that's appropriate, and for a middle-income community or a low-income community you have a different type of solution. So you can be technology agnostic and you can bring in more, you can crowd in more actors to deliver those services. The other interesting feature of these systems is that they support very much the circular economy objectives because the resources are generated close to where they are needed and where they can be used. Water is very heavy, and our traditional centralized models is that We treat water, we move it long distances, we use it, then we move it long distances to treat it again, and then we think about moving it back so people can reuse it. And this is very energy intensive. Whereas with these decentralized modules, you have the opportunity to do things much closer to where the resources themselves are being generated. And when you look at sort of peri-urban areas where you're sort of building these decentralized modules, it gives you the opportunity to co-digest, for example, your agro-industrial waste with your wastewater to generate sort of, you know, decent amounts of energy. The last area where you see a lot of interest in this is in terms of resiliency. So when you have a failure, a flood or some sort of extreme event, traditionally centralized systems get wiped out. And you see that a lot. You know, when I was based in the US, at Sandy, the entire water supply and wastewater system for New York was knocked out. With these systems, you can contain the failure within modules. So the failure doesn't propagate throughout the system. So they have this sort of natural inbuilt resiliency that you don't have with centralized systems. And this is what's making them very interesting, particularly for the global south. You do have some very good examples of hybrid systems, currently particularly in the global north. Here you see some from Europe and from North America. And most of these systems are sitting within a centralized setup, but they have come off the grid. And they're utilizing much less water than you would do in the more conventional areas. When you look at something like ocean harm, excuse me. Not a call, it's my alarm. So when you look at, say, ocean charm, for example, they collect black water separately, they collect their grey water separately, they collect their food waste separately, they co-digest the black water and food water to generate energy to support their local travel buses, and the grey water is used to generate struvite, and also the biosolids are used as a soil conditioner. So you're seeing these types of approaches emerging. And you know, a lot of work in IWA is predicting that this could become a very disruptive solution moving forward. The final thing I wanted to mention before I close is the whole idea of the innovations that we're seeing emerging. A lot around how quickly these innovations are taken up is based around this concept of readiness, right? And most of our focus on readiness is on technology readiness. And I think most of you know about technology readiness, where you know the lower levels, the 1, 2, and 3s of your TRLs, technology readiness levels, are where someone in a university is thinking about a new research topic and they're starting to sort of investigate it. When you go up to 3, 4, 5, you're starting to develop pilots and demonstration projects. And then as you go higher up to sort of 7, 8, 9, you're starting to commercialize your products. And so we use this approach to sort of consider where we are in our technology development. But as I said, when you look at why things don't get taken up, it's not because of the technology. And we have to think about other types of readiness dimensions. So societal readiness asks, is the solution really addressing a societal need? Has there been effective stakeholder engagement and testing? And finally, are people willing to adopt these new solutions, and are they willing to pay for it? Organizational readiness is very important because it really talks to the capacity of the utilities to use these new innovations. Do they have the capability, the skills? Questions around how will they integrate these solutions into their current processes, and what will be the pain to gain ratios for this utility to take on this new type of innovation? And I think one of the most important dimensions of all of this is the legal or regulatory landscape. New innovations can only really be taken up if the regulatory framework or the legislative framework allows them to be taken up. And so legal readiness is really one of the most critical dimensions of readiness. It can hinder the uptake of new ideas, but it can also be the thing that stimulates or becomes the catalyst for new innovations to take up. Now, readiness is not a homogeneous thing, right? So if you take, for example, something like waste to energy, you'll find high levels of readiness across all the dimensions. It's not very controversial, right, when you look at waste to energy. But when you look at, say, material pathways, something like, say, water reuse, you might have a high level of readiness in your technologies. But when you look at the other dimensions, your readiness might be very low. And so it would be pointless to spend your time trying to improve your technologies, right? It would be much better for you to spend your time trying to address these other dimensions to ensure that the research that you're doing or the technologies you're developing get taken up. These types of frameworks are very helpful for utilities. I always finish with this slide. We can't stay in the business as usual lane, right? Global change is not going to allow us to do that with issues around climate, rapid urbanization. We can't continue to sort of sustain our 19th century infrastructure and hope that it's going to provide us with the solutions we want. I think most utilities are in the middle lane, right? They're trying to repurpose their infrastructure through things like intensification. And this is where what I would call sustaining and efficiency innovations are happening, where we're really trying to get more out of what we already have. We're trying to do more with our existing infrastructure. And I think there are limits to that. You can do, so much, but there are limits. I think the big opportunities are in these emerging economies where they're starting a little bit from scratch. And there they can rethink how they use water, how they reuse water. They can rethink the typology of their systems. They can start to look seriously at, centralized versus decentralized hybrids. And I think it's in these countries where you're going to see the greatest innovations in the space of both wastewater and water supply. And I think these countries are going to be what creates the impetus for change in the global north. This is what I'm seeing in my role at IWA. Just a plug, we have our World Water Congress in Toronto in 2024. I know it's during the French holidays and just after the Olympic Games. So I know most of you probably will be on a beach somewhere, but it's a fantastic event, and I would encourage any of you who are interested to attend. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Kala, for these insights on the global water trends. I will be taking a few questions now, so if you want to think about your question. In the meantime, I will ask Aditi to share a few words about the International Solid Waste Association Congress as well.
Exactly, right after Kala, right? Like your Congress, the International Solid Waste Association Congress will take place in, wait for it, Cape Town, South Africa. A good chance to see the Big Five in September 15th to 18th. So you can go to our website and check that out too, or go to both, go to Canada and then come down to South Africa. You're welcome.
Thank you. So do we have a few questions? We don't have a lot of time, but if there's a question, we can take it. I'll give you another opportunity to think about a question by sharing a few insights I've written down here in Kala. There are actually quite a few similarities between our approach to waste management and the things you shared about water. You've shared about the intensification of the use of our infrastructure. In waste, we talk a lot about the intensification of the use of everything that we use so that we produce less wastes. Water productivity, using the right amount for the right usage, same thing. Reducing waste has the same philosophy. Solutions tailored to the local contexts, when you were talking about that decentralized approach, that's like the main topic in waste management. There are so many solutions. Each solution is different for a specific context. And then this paradigm shift. We need to start thinking differently about our problems to get to the right solutions. I think that's definitely a common trend between those two topics. If I don't see a hand raising up, I do see a hand raising up.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your very nice presentation. I am Etienne Paul from INSA Toulouse and involved also in Astee management. I saw that you mentioned something interesting about decentralized systems, but you didn't spoke about source separation, for example, and we can make the parallel with waste. What is your opinion about source separation? And you can then decentralize the treatment of these source-separated effluent, but also you can re-centralize in order to make them more profitable. What?
So I think the equivalent. So I didn't talk about what goes into the modules of decentralization. And decentralization is also about scale, right? What we find within IWA is good sort of scale for doing some of these clever things of reuse and energy recovery is around 30 to 50,000 population equivalent. So they're not small. But where we're seeing a lot of innovation and we see potential disruption is in the design of toilets themselves, right? And this is where we're now looking at toilets that don't use so much water. Source separation in terms of urine and feces, there's been a lot of work on that. But now we're seeing, particularly through the initiative of the Gates Foundation, the Reinvent the Toilet initiative, that there's this potential that you are going to have toilets which never have to be connected to a sewer, and they can do all the magic within the toilet itself, right? And they've got, I think, we work very closely with the Gates Foundation, and they've got about 12 toilets which have really, the technology seems to be quite worthwhile. And we're now in the process of working with Gates to look at how to commercialize those. So I think that with source separation, it's what Corinne says, it's different strokes for different folks, right? It's very context specific. And there was a lot of work in things like urine separation from feces separation, but urine is very heavy, right? And moving urine to sort of treat it becomes problematic. So what we're seeing is the potential for source separation in the toilet itself, and then your recovery of potential byproducts from it within the toilet over a long period because the volumes aren't sufficient per toilet. So you're seeing this type of approach taking place. So I think that as we start to evolve these decentralized modules, what goes inside them is something that there's a lot of interesting ideas. So the systems that you saw from Europe and North America, they are much larger systems at sort of an estate level, where they separate the water, the grey water, the black water, the food wastewater. The grey water might be used after some treatment for flushing. So there's a lot of sort of circular economy things going on. But I think that in terms of solid waste source separation and our sector source separation, I think they're slightly different. I don't know if I've addressed your question. Yeah.
Do you want to say a few words? Oh, sorry.
On source separation?
Or we had other questions.
Yes, hi. My name is Gabrielle. I work for Tilia, a consulting firm in France and Germany, actually. Still on the decentralization part of things, when I was listening to you, I thought I understand the versatility of technologies, but then wouldn't it make, I was thinking that makes it complicated to manage, like the maintenance. The beauty of having centralized systems, of course, is that you kind of have a more simple O&M, like maintenance. So the variety of providers and technologies may make it more difficult to maintain. So that was wondering if you could address that.
I think there are two things. The first is that decentralization doesn't mean that it's not a governance narrative here, right? So for example, in countries like Uganda, you have some levels of decentralization, but it's still managed by a central utility. It just makes it less complicated for them to manage rather than having a spaghetti network. But I think for me, from a disruptive point of view, when you look at the energy sector and the telecommunications sector, right, what's happened there is that you've got certain types of providers coming into the market. So it always amazes me that people in areas where they're defecating in the open, they have a mobile phone, right? But it's not that they have the mobile phone that's interesting. It's that they can charge that mobile phone, right? They have the infrastructure to charge the phone, even in an area where they don't have a toilet. And that's because there's been an opening up of the market. And so solar providers and different types of electricity providers are coming into the market, tailoring the innovation for those communities to make it affordable. And they're able to maintain it and deliver it. So I think, historically, the energy and the water and the telecommunication sectors were natural monopolies. Water is a natural monopoly. But I think in areas where we are not giving services to the poor, right, where they are really outside the market, They cannot wait for the centralized utility to say, one day we will get you this service, because they are suffering now. And this is why I think there are these opportunities for entrepreneurs to come in and try to offer these people the service. And you know, I have another presentation where I talk about disruption and what I talk about market creating innovations. And this is where you're creating a market where it doesn't exist. And currently with sanitation and water supply, large parts of people are outside the market. And so it's okay to say that it becomes complicated, but if they're not getting a service anyway, then I think that, you know, you have to sort of think about it from their perspective rather than from the utilities perspective. I hope I'm not too controversial on that.
Very good. So we'll take one last question very, very quickly because we're running out of time.
Hi, I'm Marlene Jukun. I work for Xylem. Thanks very much for the presentation. Very appreciated. I have a quick question. So when we see the evolution of the wastewater treatment, it was to protect the public health, then to protect the environment. Then we have the paradigm shift to recover the resources. And now we need to tackle the climate change and reduce our emissions. So I'd love to hear a little bit on the challenges and your thoughts on what the water and especially the wastewater sector needs to do for mitigating our greenhouse gas emissions.
I think the issue of mitigation is very important, and actually most of the intensification processes are addressing the mitigation narrative, right? I think the problem that we have is twofold. There are two contradictions that I see in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. One is that we confuse the reduction in energy with the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and it's not the same. And so there are innovations that we are implementing that reduce our energy, but actually, they by accident create more fugitive emissions where actually our greenhouse gas footprint goes up. So Animox, for example, is an example where the nitrous oxide emissions are quite high, potentially, and they are 300 times more potent than, say, carbon dioxide. So you have this contradiction, right? You want to save energy, but are you indirectly generating other types of emissions? And methane is another problem that we have in our sewers, in our primary settler tanks, but we only focus about it on our anaerobic digesters, right, and the leakage that takes place. So that's the first thing. We have to understand that. The other contradiction I see is that we're moving in a direction where our scope 2 emissions, right, the electricity that we use, are slowly becoming more and more focused around renewables. Right, we're sort of depending more on things like solar and on other types of renewables. And then the question becomes, right, is it better to employ processes that use more energy, but use renewable energy so they don't generate any emissions, but they avoid the generation of these fugitive emissions? And there's some interesting work going on in IWA where they're looking at electrochemical processes that can target the precursors to some of these emissions. But they require electricity, right? And they only make sense if the electricity is green. And so we are going through a very contradictory, confusing, complex sort of space, right? Where we're all trying to save energy because it's greenhouse gas, but then we're creating something. Now, if all the electricity becomes, if our scope 2 emissions go to 0, then our scope 1 emissions is what we have to focus on. Right. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to both of you. I'm sorry, but we have to move on because we're short on time. We will now get into the second part of the session, which will come to 2 deep dives. The first one will be with Dirk Nellen on the topic of plastics. Dirk is a senior researcher at the Flemish Institute for Technological Research, which is called VITO also. And he's also a very active ISWA members. you're chairing the group on recycling and waste minimization. So he's also a great resource for you to go to learn more about how ISWA works. Dirk, I'll let you go through.
Thank you very much. Bonjour à tous. C'est tout le français que je sais, mais je comprends parfaitement des questions en français. Ce n'est pas un problème. But the presentation, I will give it in English. Well, I'm working for both FITOR and ISWA, but in very related topic, and the focus of my work for both organizations is plastic. How do I pass the slides? Okay. Yeah. So we are talking about plastics recycling, and the aim of plastics recycling is to create a circular production system for plastics. The example I have here is the Belgian circular system, which is different from the French system. It's also available publicly, so you can download it from the reference I used there. And the Belgian system is a production-oriented system. And Belgium produces more than 7 million tons of plastics, but it only consumes like a bit more than 1 million tons. Yeah, only is relative. 1 million tons. So this means that most of the plastic produced in Belgium will be exported. It's a problem from a circular economy point of view, because what do we want in circular economy? We want to substitute fossil resources by renewable or recycled resources. So if we have a recycled content target in Belgium, it will apply to the 7 million tons. But if we have a recycling target on the consumption, it will apply on the 1.2 million tons. And it's this dichotomy that we will look closer to. So in all Europe, until this moment we are speaking, mechanical recycling of plastics dominates the market. Mechanical recycling requires sorted and cleaned feedstock, but since polymers will degrade over the subsequent heating and cooling cycles, and because all the additives that are present in the plastic, so we're talking about fillers, about plasticizers, additives like inks, stabilizers, colorants, flame retardants, etc. All these additives will be recycled together with mechanically recycled input. So that's why mechanical recycling has limitations, and severe limitations regarding to the recycling for substituting substituting virgin plastics. And that's why we have other options like the chemical recycling options. There's also the dissolution purification option, which maintains the polymer structure but will enable the taking out of all the additives. It requires less energy, but it will require solvents that also have to be recovered or recycled. And then we have the chemical recycling, which is more energy intensive. And the option, also the problem with water, we offer solutions, but the solutions require energy. So we also have a problem there. Currently in Europe, 20% of the feedstock for plastic production is from recycled feedstock, and this is only mechanically recycled feedstock. There's it's 0.1% chemically recycled, but yeah, that's not making a lot of difference or impact. And that's actually a problem. Because I have a lot of technical plastics with all these additives, and they are not fit for mechanical recycling. So what will we do with these? First, we look to the collection. We only can recycle plastics that are being collected. If they are not collected, there will be no recycling, which is like an evident, but people forget the importance of collection. So where is the plastic consumed? Yeah, it's where the people live, and you can see the dark areas on the map. That's where population density is the highest, and so the plastic waste generation also will be at the highest level. We see that in Europe, in the EU, it's about 30 million tons per year of plastic waste being collected. But from this amount, only half is collected in separate collection systems. The rest is going into the residual household waste. And yeah, only 3.8% of that will be recycled, and all the rest of the not separately collected fraction will be lost to final disposal. From the separately collected part, we only will recycle half, which is also not very great. So we have a quarter of all the plastics that are collected that is being recycled mechanically. That's not great. And why is this happening? Because we don't have recycling capacity in the EU. We have mechanical recycling capacity, but it's mainly focused on PET bottle recycling. There's something on PVC recycling, like pipes and windows. There's also HDPE recycling, but most of the recycling, the mechanical recycling of plastic in Europe, is focused on PET. Now, this is very expensive, but somebody pays for it. The extended producer responsibility schemes or deposit return systems will pay for this very high cost. Oh, I see I have to speed up. It's 5 minutes left. Okay, I will speed up very much then. Another problem is that our plastic production share, in the global production, is declining very fast. So this moment, only 14% of world plastics are produced in Europe. If we lose the production capacity, we will also lose the absorption capacity for the recycled plastics. So that's not good news. Yeah, so what's the main problem that we are facing? It's fossil primary production and the production of secondary materials. It has different costs. And it will always be much more expensive to produce recycled plastics. And that's, we cannot do anything about it. Why? Because if we have plastic from gas and oil, we bring in the plastic by pipelines, big barges. It's homogeneous flows for years and years, exactly the same composition, the same specifications being complied with for industry, and long-term supply contracts. And you see this poor guy, or maybe it's not a poor guy, this guy working with his truck, and he has to go door to door, and he collects bags that are like 2 kilos each, and then the composition of what is in the bag is completely different, the bag in his left hand and his right hand. So what will we make of that that is high quality? Very difficult. And still at European level, we have this waste treatment perspective. We want to treat waste. It's kilos of waste treated. That's the recycling targets. But circular economy is not about kilos of waste treated. It's about producing secondary raw materials of quality, of industrial quality. So that's a completely different perspective. And the European target setting is not aligned with this perspective. We know from studies, this is a study developed by the University of Ghent in Belgium, Currently, in 2018, it was 18%, now it's 20%, as I showed, of our plastic production is from recycled feedstock. If we would stretch the possibilities of mechanical recycling, improving collection, improving sorting into 10, 11, 12 different polymer fractions, then we could reach 49% of recycled feedstock by 2030. But if we let in chemical recycling, this percentage goes up to 80%. And so Aditi says we cannot recycle our way out, but we can do a great deal there anyway. But the problems are several. If we look to recycling, not as a waste management process, not as a treatment, but as a secondary material production process, then we have to dive into the process in order to improve the process. And that's what we do as Vito, with the Port of Antwerp, with the chemical industry, and we started looking into how is this ecosystem built up and what's there. And we see, whoa, the stakeholders are waste collectors, transporters, shippers, distributors, shredders, dismantlers, EPR systems, retailers, demolition and renovation companies, dismantlers, depolluters. Whoa, this is only naming the stakeholders. So we have to organize these people. We have to know these people. Who are these companies? What are they doing? What is their contribution in this ecosystem we want to improve and to generate secondary resources? So that's why we inventoried all the companies in Belgium and the neighboring countries, including France, in a map to see what do they do. What polymers are they recycling, sorting, what plastics are they producing, where is the company located, and then, only then, with these insights, we can start to build up a kind of a hubs and spoke system. We are building this up for the Port of Antwerp now, in order to create the logistics and the technology associations to get the system working alongside of the virgin production system and contributing to this virgin production system by delivering high quality material. Not like now, we have high recycling percentages, but the recycled material doesn't serve a lot of applications. So what we, oh, this is nice. What we, I'm already at the conclusions, but I have some additional slides, but it doesn't matter. What did we conclude in order to make a relevant, not a marginal system like we have now, which is fragmented? We need upscaling. And I don't say we need large centralized chemical industry for making this recycled feedstock target happening. The scale also refers sometimes to the network. I can have a small activity, but which is well networked. Today, all plastic recycling in Europe is being fragmented and it's not well connected. There's no logistic network around it. Companies have it individually, but even I asked, I will not name companies, but some international companies, what do you do exactly on each of these sites that you told us you have activities? And they had to call a lot of people because they didn't know what kind of service was provided at a specific geographic location. So scale, logistic optimization, trade in plastic is very important. Because we have to think about a smart specialization when it comes to plastics recycling, because technologies are very different. They require very different feedstock. At this moment, the chemical companies are like crazy looking for feedstock to start their activities. And they don't find feedstock. They ask our help to find feedstock. I have some collaboration examples to close. One is the Citeo contract with Indaver. It's a Belgian chemical recycler. So part of what Citeo collects of plastic packaging will go to feed as a feedstock to the plant in Antwerp. Suez also activities in China. We are actually buying recycled PET even from China because it's cheaper than the recycled PET here. So imagine. We have also collaboration on the research part. So we are in several projects with European partners, mainly companies, in order to see, is it possible to extract from this urban mine the plastics of the specifications that we as a company, there's Scasa, there's Philips, big companies, would require. Is it possible even? And how much of these very particular specifications can we take out from the urban mine in Europe? So that's some examples. I hope a deep dive, 15 minutes. It's not very deep, you will understand. But I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you. You can stay here. Thank you very much, Dirk. It's true. It's a very fast deep dive, but you can get opportunities to further discuss with Dirk tonight and tomorrow. Do we have some questions on what? Yeah, please.
Thanks a lot, Dirk. Just quick question about the scalability, or at what scale have you got chemical recycling plants in Europe? I mean, and also for the global south that collects mixed waste mostly, how can chemical recycling be an option? Like, just.
Yeah, that's why I said the scale will very much depend on the technology you want to use. If you have a dissolution purification process with solvents, it can be done on very small scale. And you yield, you produce polymers that also can be sold on small scale. If you go to further than depolymerization, you go to pyrolysis or gasification, of course you will have basic molecules at the end that, for instance, can be fed to a steam cracker. But a steam cracker, you know, the average steam cracker capacity in Europe is about 2.5, 3 million tons. So if I want to substitute only, let's say, 10% of the feedstock of a steam cracker, I need 300,000 tons of pyrolysis oil. So that's, at that scale, I must start thinking of if that's my technology. But that will depend on the feedstock availability and also on the availability of cheaper technologies. Because it's not that mechanical recycling is good and chemical is bad because it's more energy intensive. No, it's what you can produce at the end and how good is the product as a substitute for a primary raw material. And with some things you cannot do better, and with a lot of most technical plastics, chemical recycling will be the only viable option. So scale is also the scale of your network, of your logistics system. So activities within a big and well-organized logistics system can remain small.
Thank you. I'd like to bring one more component to this conversation, is the environmental impacts. And so on the small scale chemical recycling, the risks of water pollution associated to that are very large. And then also maybe for the larger scale activities, you know, weighing the impacts in terms of carbon emissions, water pollutions, etc. There are very difficult choices to make, and that can be very different depending on where you are and the capacities and the enabling environment that's in that specific location.
Exactly, and that's why regarding to the end product of recycling, you have to make sure it is a substitute for what you would have produced from fossil sources. And so if you produce a worse thing than the original with more emissions during the production, then you will be doing a bad thing.
That's the threshold.
Now, there's no thing like, because Flemish authorities, they really say we only will give permits to installations with mechanical recycling because mechanical recycling is better and the highest quality output coming from the mechanical recycling. Yeah, okay, guys, that's not possible. That's not possible. If you want to be a solution, your solution must be complete. And solutions, they involve all levels of the waste hierarchy. At the end, you will have a fraction that really has to be incinerated because nothing else can be done with it. Of course, if you put enough money and energy in whatever solution, yeah, you will yield this high quality input. But it will always be a balancing between the cost of your recycling operations, the price you will get for your output product, and the willingness to pay for the difference.
Completely. I'm just going to check to see if there's one last question before we move on. And I think, that maybe as a conclusion, I'd like to say that this whole plastics recycling thing is a huge international topic that needs to be better regulated also, because this the economics of it will really make it go one way or the other. And that's a lot of the discussions that are happening these days around the international treaty to combat plastic pollution. So these are really hot topics right now, where a lot of people don't agree on which way to go. No more questions on this topic, so we will now move on. Thank you very much, Dirk. And make the link with water again. We've touched on the issues of water quality with the impact of plastic pollution and plastic recycling activities potentially having polluting impact on water. And we'll now hear about the reuse opportunities in Spain and how from water that is actually sometimes of not so good quality, you can actually make new water. Philippe Rouget works with Veolia Iberia Latam. I thought it was Akbar. Yeah, in Spain.
In Iberia.
Yeah, okay. And so he will be sharing with us some a case study on Spain as a whole, and then specifically on Barcelona.
Mm-hmm.
Philippe.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the organization, Corinne, Diane, for this invitation. So I am going to speak about water reuse in Spain. And first of all, the current situation. Spain is probably the European country with most affected by the drought. Today, 75% of Spanish area is undergoing desertification. The forecast for 2060, it's close to 20% less water in resources. Current volume reuse in Spain is around 400 hectometer cubic per year. It's around 10%, something more, okay, of the water, wastewater treated in Spain. Just to have a big figure of what is the government doing, hydrological plans of the third cycle is a period of 2022 to 2027, was approved in January 2023. There is a budget of 1 billion euros, okay, for 200 projects more or less, okay. And the target is to double the quantity of water reused in Spain. Okay, so $1 billion for 200 projects, sorry, and to reach 800 hectometer cubic per year of reused water Okay, it's about 20% of the wastewater treated in Spain. That is a big figures. Where we are reusing Spain, or when we start, it's in 1989 in Playa d'Aro, okay, close to the Costa Brava, basically to irrigation of golf course. Today, about 27% of 2,000 wastewater treatment plants are equipped with tertiary treatment and can produce reclaimed water. Mainly, this water, the reclaimed water, is used in agriculture. It's normal, okay? And also uses are urban, industrial, leisure for golf course, etc. Environmental, we put groundwater recharge, wetlands, ecological flows of rivers, etc. Half 60% is agriculture. A third, more or less, is recreational, 10% in industry, and 10% more or less in urban usage. Very, very few today in groundwater research and in environmental. Where basically in all the seaside of Mediterranean Sea, okay, is normal. You have a high demand in this area and a high scarcity. It's very hot. Half of the population of Spain is living in the seaside, okay, in Mediterranean seaside. But other projects, like here, we can see in the humid Spain, in Oviedo, for instance, or close to Oviedo, to Gijón, close to Bilbao, and especially in Madrid, okay, in the center of Spain. But water reuse in the center of Spain don't give you more water. These projects are basically to focus it on guarantee water supply for the population. I take, for example, Madrid. Madrid have built about 600 kilometers of reused water pipings, okay, to diminish the demand of the population of the city, okay. So water is used in industry, the water is used in park irrigation, to recharge rivers, okay, but it's focused on guarantee the supply of water in Madrid. The Madrid area is finite, okay, and the rain in this area is also finite, okay. So every 10 years you have a big drought in Madrid, okay, and you need to provide water to the population, okay. So all this water, all this infrastructure of reclaiming water, it's paid by the customers for potable water, drinking water, okay. So drivers in Spain. It's a scarcity, the needs that generate solution. If you have no water, you have to find solution to put water on the pipes. And why water reuse? The EC regulation of European Parliament and Council on minimum requirement for reuse of water in agriculture say clearly that water reuse has a lower environmental impact than other water supply alternatives like desalination and transport, okay? Transport and desalination, the same energy for 200 kilometers transport for desalination of seawater, more or less. But the biggest driver we have to push the water reuse in Spain is regulation. The first one appeared in Catalonia at the beginning of 2000, okay, and after in other regions. Is mandatory to irrigate, for instance, golf course or leisure activities, okay, with regenerated water. So there is an obligation. The second one, it's a real decree appeared in 2007, okay, with quality standards according to use. It was a regulation, not really a good administrative deregulation, but more a technical criteria to match quality and kind of usage of the reclaimed water. But it was a first step. Now in 2020, with the 741 regulation of Europe, there is a new model, okay, for water reuse in agriculture. Everybody know it, okay. Now it's mandatory, and Spain is working today in an initiative. I think it's interesting to explain it, with an extension of the model of the regulation of 2020 741. 741, it was only for agriculture, but Spain is using the same class of water, okay, but not only for the agricultural application, but for all the other usage, like leisure, environmental, industry, etc., and urban. Okay, it's very interesting because we have like it's the same law, okay, it's the same matrix, okay, applied to all the usage, and probably at the end of this year they will apply this regulation. And after we have another decree quite recent about financing. There is first in Spain, if you release treated water by the wastewater treatment plant to the river, you have to pay a tax, okay? But if you reuse, you don't pay this tax. So there is less taxes for water reuse. And if you abandon the first concession of the water, for instance, the concession for drinking water, concession for irrigation or things like that, and instead of using this concession for water reuse, for your application, and you use water reuse, so the government is paying the bill. Is paying the bill of the capex and the opex of the infrastructure you need. Okay, in order to, so that is pushing a lot. Okay. Different usage. I am late, so I am going to be quick. Okay, urban. Okay, it's for irrigation. It's to diminish the demand of global demand of city or an agglomeration. Agricultural. Today we have a big issue in Spain because farmers are not very happy to pay for transport and storage. And transport and storage, it's much more expensive than treatment. Okay. Industrial, we have a lot of case like you was explaining before for ISWA. Okay, in water à la carte in Madrid for water industry. Okay, for Madrid it's Tarragona, Malaga. It's for power plants, pulp and paper, petrochemical, all these activities. But when I say water à la carte, it's like what he was explaining for waste basin. We are selling directly osmotic water for steam boilers and things like that. It's not bad quality, it's a very high quality water reuse and well paid. Okay, and that can help you to manage the investment of piping to bring this water to your clients. Recreational, it was mandatory, what I said before. Environmental, today we have basically IPR, indirect potable reuse. Okay, we include this kind of reuse in environmental reuse. And I take advantage of this thing to focus in Barcelona quickly. Barcelona water supply is based in the water coming from two basins. The northern, because they are coming from Pyrenees. One is the Ter basin, the other one is the Llobregat basin. Both are very, very busy, a lot of industries and population. Area of Barcelona, it's about 4.5 million inhabitants. So the wastewater treatment plant in Barcelona have several usage of water. We have water for agriculture, we have water to recharge aquifer against sea sea water intrusion, okay? This water, for instance, is osmotic water, okay? Etc., etc. But 200 cubic meter per day today, it's pumped up to the Llobregat River, okay, in order to substitute the water who is not going by the rivers, okay, because of the drought. You know that in Perpignan, in France, you have a very big problem, okay, a very big issue. So, terre transfer in a normal year, it's a third part of terre transfer is from the north, is a third part of the water coming to Barcelona. Now we are nothing, okay, and all the terre transfer is replaced by water reuse, okay. We make a blending in the river at about 4 kilometers up to the drinking water treatment plant, okay. And this blending, it's more or less half, okay, between 30, 70, 30%, okay. It's going into the water treatment, the drinking water treatment. Without the reuse, it should be absolutely impossible to treat water to Barcelona. I explain it because when you have drought, and we have some lakes and dams in the close to the Pyrenees, okay, but when the reservoirs are empty, the water you have in the reservoir is a very, very bad quality. Algae and all kind of matters you have. So the big problem, the big issue we have is the quality. When you have a drought, the quality is going bad and bad and bad, and so it's impossible. It's better the quality of the output of the wastewater treatment plant, okay, once treated, then the quality of the river, okay. So we have to dilute the water of the river in order to be able to treat it. But that is only possible if the drinking water treatment plant is very performant. The drinking water treatment plant in Barcelona have 2 lines. One is ozone and activated carbon, and the other one is microfiltration and reverse osmosis. Okay, and so we are making a blending of both of kind of waters. Okay, in order to make potable water. So the scheme of Barcelona, it's well understood when you understand the treatment of drinking water. To finish, some lessons learned and good practice. Water reuse is a local project. Okay, discharge of water is local. Okay, the customers are local, so the regulation are local regulations. Okay, in most of the case, so. Locally is when you can develop this project. Transport and storage. Sometimes we think about treatment, but treatment is very easy. Treatment is mature technology. The problem is more in the master plan. Okay, to find the clients, to make a sustainable planning, to work on legal and economic support. And it's essential for getting started. Sanitation safety plan, when you're running, it's absolutely mandatory in order to control the risk and to manage the risk of water reuse. And for me, the most important is a tariff and business model. Okay, because somebody have to pay. Okay, have to pay for this water, and generally it's more associated with local surroundings and local water tariff. What I was explaining in Madrid, it's directly local water tariff. We want to guarantee the water supply in the city, so it's through the local water tariffs that we are paying the infrastructure, the capex of water reuse. In Barcelona, the same. Okay, because. It's not really a business today for agriculture. Okay, they need big quantities of water, but they are not very, very happy when they have to pay the bill. Okay, and it's easier to have. Finally, the bill is the customers who have money is the customer of the city. And just a last lesson, it's patience, because you have to start by master plan, you have to make a project, etc. And normally we have no project developed until 5, 6, 7 years starting the project. So patience. But you have to start now and do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe you stay here for just a second. Thank you very much. It was very insightful. Do we have some questions from the audience? Wait, yeah. Diane.
So if I understand well, you have direct reuse of water in your drinking water. I know that in Paris you drink direct reuse because people have been in the river Seine have been, but there it's quite direct. In fact, when you do the reuse,
it's quite direct. But
in your microphone.
Sorry, it's quite yes, Diane. It's quite direct. But in United States, for instance, when they speak about direct, it's very yes, it's quite direct because we have no the time. We have no time.
Okay, you mixed it, but
yeah,
it's direct.
We have no time. Yes, it's direct. It's more or less. We say that it's environmental. Okay.
You have time between
reuse? It's 4 kilometers of the river.
Okay. So it's not
it's
2 days or 15 days because you are doing re-injection. So then you have 1 month or 2 months. It's 4 hours. Okay. Well, you have time, but not so much.
Not so much.
Sorry, thank you. Which is not possible today in France, I think.
Huh? And it's not possible today in Spain.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But no, by the regulation, yes, it's true, because it's only possible in Spain if you have an exceptionality.
It's during your drought seasons that you do this.
So it's not the permanent, it's what you show.
Yeah.
When you don't need, you don't.
Yeah, we don't, but when you have an exceptionality, we do it.
Thanks.
So we're running out of time, so if there is one last pressing question, we will take it. You can. I thought it was very inspiring to listen to you because it really was tying back to those readiness conditions that Kala was talking about, and also to the need to have that external driver. I mean, the lack of water is the initial external driver to push you to do all these things. But then you do need that technology readiness, you need the societal acceptance, the legal regulation framework that allows you to do this in those exceptional conditions, and then the organizational readiness, the capacity of the staff, the structure of the organization that enables you to do this. And so to make a last connection to waste before we close, I think what we're missing in waste is that external driver. In water, if you lack water, you do things. In waste, and same thing for wastewater, that external driver is more diffuse. It's the impacts on the environment, it's the impacts on health, and we're not as capable of making these impacts become strong drivers for us to take actions. Anyway, food for thoughts. Diane, Das, would you like to share with us a few concluding words as president of the International Affairs Commission of Astee,
and you are the vice president. So it's no. Corinne and me, we really try to introduce in the Astee that international session because we both of us think that it is nice for you to have sometime that vision of what happened at international. We both think that it is very useful for companies, people, organization to sometime can see a bit abroad. There are lots of innovation abroad, lots of cases which can be used, and we try inside Astee have both bring ideas from outside and also bring vision of France outside. So we think it's good. Thank you really, Kala and Aditi, to come. We are really honored to have you because France is part of your countries, but there are so many, so you need. And thank you for you to be there, because it was important for us to see that there is an interest inside Astee to what happened abroad. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you also very much to Dirk Nellen and to Philippe Rouget. They come from Spain, from Belgium, all the way to the end of the world in Quimper to share their thoughts with us.